The 60th anniversary specials of Doctor Who have been criticised by some as not being a suitable celebration of the show's past. But actually, in a way, they do celebrate almost every era, with only one Doctor's era being missed out. I'll reveal which era that is later in the video. Now, it's certainly true that it's a very different type of celebration than we've previously had for big decade anniversaries. For the 10th, 20th, 30th, and 50th anniversaries, there was some kind of multi-Doctor story as the main event, so it's understandable that fans might expect that. I myself love a good multi-Doctor story, and would have welcomed one. However, it's also understandable that the production team might think that approach is a bit tired, especially when we effectively got that type of special only a year before with Power of the Doctor. So, to see how successful the specials actually were at celebrating the past of the show, in this video I'm going through each era of the show and how they were acknowledged in the 360th specials. Let me know in the comments if I miss any. I'll be breaking these into major and minor celebrations, major ones being things like returning characters from an era or plot points from them directly continued, minor being those quick references to things from those eras. Let's crack on with the 60s and the First Doctor's era. There's a pretty major thing celebrating the First Doctor's era in these specials, and that's the return of the villain, the Toymaker, with his first appearance on screen since his episodes being challenged by William Hartnell's First Doctor in the story The Celestial Toymaker all the way back in 1966. There are multiple references to that previous encounter throughout the giggle, including the Doctor reminding the Toymaker that he won that time, so the Toymaker winning their card-cutting game this time actually only makes it 1-1, and it needs to be best out of 3. We also see brief flashes of clips from that classic era episode, both the Toymaker played by Michael Gough and the Doctor played by William Hartnell flash onto the screen as the 14th Doctor realises who the toy shop owner in front of him truly is. In the minor acknowledgements category, the 15th Doctor name checks one Mavic Chen when he's talking to 14 at the end of the episode. Mavic Chen was another First Doctor adversary, the Guardian of the Solar System in the 41st century who teamed up with the Daleks in the Dalek Master Plan. There's only one minor one for the second Doctor, and that's the 15th Doctor mentioning being exiled. Yes, this could be classed as a third Doctor thing as well, but the sentencing happened to the second Doctor, and it's his era's only reference, so I'm giving it to him. The third Doctor era has a couple of references, some minor, some major. For a minor one, how about this line?
I was scientific advisor number 1.
That line from the Star Beast isn't actually quite accurate. Liz Shaw was employed as an official scientific advisor at UNIC before the Doctor got brought on board as staff, but regardless, this is a reference to the Third Doctor's time on Earth in the employ of the United Nations Intelligence Task Force, UNIT. A minor mention by itself, but talking of UNIT, while the organisation itself, featuring heavily in both the Star Beast and the Giggle, has popped up in every decade since the 70s, and its introduction, it was with the Third Doctor that it featured most prominently, so we'll credit its major inclusion as a nod to the Third Doctor's era. The Brigadier also gets a reference.
I remember your father working night and day to keep UNIT secret, and look at you now!
On to Tom Baker's era then, and the Fourth Doctor, and this gets a major callback, albeit one to the comics and not the TV episodes. The Star Beast, the first of the 60th specials, is adapted from a Fourth Doctor comic of the same name, published in Doctor Who Weekly in 1980. That comic was the origin of Beep the Meep, the Raff Warriors, and even that boy Fudge who appears in the episode briefly. Of course, much was changed from the original comic, but much was kept as well, and the fact that they adapted it is a pretty major callback to that era of the programme. Also in the Star Beast is a minor reference to the Fourth Doctor's era when 14 pulls out a judge's wig, just like the Fourth Doctor used in the Stones of Blood. The 15th Doctor mentions a few other things from this era near the end of the Giggle as well, the key to time, the devastation on Logopolis, and remembering Sarah Jane Smith, which I suppose could also be a reference to the Third Doctor or maybe even the 10th Doctor's eras, but I mean she mostly associated with the Fourth Doctor. Only one mention for the 5th Doctor's era, and that's poor departed Adric, the 4th and 5th Doctor's companion, who sadly met his fate crashing to Earth on a spaceship and wiping out the dinosaurs during an adventure with the Cybermen. R.I.P. Adric. As for the 6th Doctor's era, there's not too much honoured here, apart from maybe the return of Mel Bush, who was introduced in Colin Baker's last story and continued on to be a companion for the 7th Doctor. In The Giggle, she returned in quite a prominent role as a member of UNIT, so I think we'll call this a major acknowledgement. There is also 15's reference to being put on trial, which I suppose could apply to the 2nd Doctor when he's banished to Earth by the Time Lords, but as there was a whole season of the 6th Doctor's era called Trial of a Time Lord, I think we'll go with it being a reference to that. The 7th Doctor now, and for McCoy's era, we could also give Mel returning as she featured in a whole season of his era, so it's probably really more a reference to his era. Maybe you put it down as both. We also get the backstory on what happened to Sabalon Glitz, the mildly reformed con man who Mel stayed with when she left the Doctor. He died age 101 falling over a whiskey bottle, apparently. It does raise some questions about Mel's age, but that for another time. Another minor mention to 7's era is 15 reminiscing to 14 about fighting the gods of Ragnarok, as 7 did in the story The Greatest Show in the Galaxy. Ooh, the Wilderness Years. Now, surprisingly, there is a possible reference to the Wilderness Years when Kate references that she fought Yetis. The character of Kate Stewart was actually kind of first introduced in a non-BBC made spin-off called Downtime, which was made in the early 1990s, in which she and her dad, the Brigadier, with Nicholas Courtney reprising that role, indeed fought the Yetis. This was one of many grey area spin-offs in the Wilderness Years, as the producers did officially license the character of the Brigadier and those of the Yeti from the writer that first devised them, because that's how rights for characters in Doctor Who worked in the classic era. If you were a freelance writer, you kept the copyright on the characters you created, so they could license them out to others without any approval from the BBC. So it was all above board copyright-wise, and yet not an official BBC product. In the plot, Kate didn't work for UNIT and was played by Beverly Cressman, not Gemma Redgrave. Here we are. The 8th Doctor, the one era of the show that I couldn't really find any reference to. And as the Doctor closest to my heart, that is sad. If I missed one, and you spotted it, please do let me know in the comments below. On to the revival era of the show then, and the 9th Doctor. In the court scene, in the car park in the Star Beast, the Doctor invokes the Shadow Proclamation, and while this has been mentioned in multiple eras of the show since, it was first mentioned by the 9th Doctor in his debut episode Rose. Talking of Rose, there are a few mentions to her. For starters, Donna's daughter has picked that name for herself due to her subconscious memory of it. She inherited part of the meta-crisis from Donna, so has this subconscious link to past adventures of the Doctor. And then the 15th Doctor also mentions OG Rose at the end of The Giggle. And so we arrive at the 10th Doctor, and really this is probably what any controversy is kind of all about, because while I'm showing here that there are celebrations of most eras of the show, it is quite clear that this era gets the most acknowledgement. In terms of major callbacks, we get the return of Tennant playing the Doctor, the return of Donna and her family, clips from their time together in Series 4 at the beginning of the Star Beast, and the resolution of the Doctor-Donna plot. In terms of minor acknowledgements, I think these are probably just a few, there's probably loads I missed, but the reaction of Tennant to Rose's name, because yes, that's kind of also a 9th Doctor thing, but it was Ten that was in love with Rose, and so his reaction is more of a reference to his particular relationship with Rose. There was reference to Donna's friend Nerys, who was mentioned before in Series 4. References to Donna's lottery win. The 10th Doctor anonymously gave her a winning ticket as a wedding present. There was the Sylvia slap. The 10th Doctor did have a habit of getting slapped by the mums of companions. And then we have a possible one, which is the psychedelic living son in the Star Beast. The 10th Doctor had met and been possessed by a living son in the episode 42, so this is possibly a reference back to that. You got Rose's cuddlies that she creates being creatures that Donna and the Doctor have met. I did say Donna's family as well in the major thing, but let's mention Wilf specifically. Wilf is back for a brief scene of the episode. While Blue Yonder, and it was great to see him. I'm calling this a major callback, just because it's Wilf. There was the line, "It's not the old Archangel network," referring to the worldwide network that the Master took advantage of back in Series 3. Galvanic radiation, which powers the beam on the new unit HQ, is the same type of radiation that is found on the surface of the Midnight Planet from Series 4. Donna mentions the adipose in the giggle, and also the Dalek bomb from Journey's End. There were probably more I missed, but there are lots of callbacks to this era, but I guess given the characters involved in these 3 specials, that was probably unavoidable. On to the 11th Doctor's era then, and there are multiple minor grade references here. There's the line, "After that I wear a bow tie," in the Star Beast while talking about the faces he had between the 10th and 14th Doctor's face. There's the Amy puppet in the Toymaker's puppet show, and reference to her being touched by an angel.
She died of old age.
Well, that's all right then.
And during 15's trip down memory lane, he mentions River Song, who appeared most prominently with the 11th Doctor. He also mentions the Pandorica. And here's a major one that I'm going to give to the 11th Doctor's era, Kate Lethbridge Stewart's appearance, which I'd class as a major callback. And I'm going to credit it to this era because it was in the 11th Doctor's era that she first appeared in the episode The Power of 3. For the 12th Doctor, there's only really minor references. Of course, there's the line, "After that, I'm a Scotsman," in the Star Beast, and the Doctor giving UNIT permission to use the galvanic beam, most likely a reference to him being president of the world as described by Kate in a couple of Capaldi-era episodes. Then there is more from the Toymaker's puppet show, the fates of both Clara getting killed by a bird on Trap Street,
She still survives in her last second of life.
Well, that's all right then.
and Bill being turned into a Cyberman.
But her consciousness survives.
Oh, well, that's all right then.
And then we reach the final era, the 13th Doctors. Mostly minor references here, maybe one major. The first of them is very early on, when 14 brandishes the psychic paper to Shaun Temple, and it shows Shaun Grand Mistress, not Grand Master, like 14 expected. The Doctor saying, "It's still catching up." There's also the final bit of the line to Shirley about the faces he's had since being the 10th Doctor, "After that, I'm a woman." As well as making cuddlies of all the things the Doctor and Donna met together, she also made a doll of Carvanista. Carvanista was the dog-like alien from Flux who was bonded to human Dan. There's the Timeless Child reference in Wild Blue Yonder when it's brought up the Doctor isn't from Gallifrey. He doesn't know where he's from. And the Flux is mentioned a few times. First in Wild Blue Yonder, where we see the psychological impact it's had on the Doctor, who says it happened because of him. And then in the Toymaster's puppet show in The Giggle. In fact, I'd even say the effect that Flux has on him is a major plot point that continues, because it contributes to him needing the rest that he decides to take at the end of The Giggle. So yeah, I'm counting that as a major callback. And then I'll throw in one miscellaneous reference that's not going to assign to an era because he's from every era after the thirds, and that's the Master, who the Toymaker says he is trapped in his gold tooth. The tooth which is mysteriously collected by a female hand after the Toymaker has been vanquished. Oh, that's another reference to the Tennant era, the first Tennant era. Just realised that. Oh! Another thing I've just realised, the Master was in the TV movie, so does that count also as a reference to the TV movie? Can we get that in there? Am I squeezing that in a bit too? I'm stretching things now, aren't I? Yeah. So I guess that means we have what I would call major acknowledgements of 7 Doctor's eras. The Toymaker from the first Doctor, Unit from the third, the Star Beast from the fourth, Mel's return from the 6th or 7th, count it as whichever one you want, the return of Tennant and the character of Donna and her family and all the Dr. Donna stuff from the 10th era, Kate Stewart from the 11th era, and the effect of the Flux on the Doctor's mental health from the 13th Doctor's era. That's not bad. It's not a major thing from every Doctor, but what it is a major thing from every decade the show was on the air. And yes, the celebration of the 10th Doctor's era is bigger than any other one era, but these specials do celebrate those other eras. I do think maybe they could have done more, still without bringing any past Doctors back. But I think it was a valiant effort to celebrate the history of the show in just a bit of a different way. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. And if you want to see my thoughts on the anniversary specials, here is a playlist of reviews that you can check out. Thanks for watching. Do subscribe if you liked what you heard and want to see and hear more. I'll see you soon. Goodbye.